right now, I was attracted to Dutch Bros when it first IPO'd, but I didn't necessarily see the value at the time. Typically, companies will IPO and there just be way too much demand and interest at the time, and people don't necessarily understand what some of the limitations could be on that, and so that over optimism is not a good time to get in. But then you will have times where things just start to get start to form a bottom, and I think Dutch Bros has hit that point, and right now they're scaling up relatively fast. I did some on the ground DD when I was in Vegas with Matt, of course, and one of the things that I highlighted and pointed out, like if when we were there, the entire like line of cars that was there for their drive-through, they're pretty much a drive-through first kind of business. They do have like open windows where you can get coffee, but there's no real places where you could sit down in most of their locations, um, and so they're primarily working through the drive-through. So the entire time I was just pointing out to Matt and the guys, like, look at the drive-through, look how
Yeah.
packed it is, and every minute there were like one or two more cars coming in. So they definitely have something going on in there. Maybe they have crack cocaine in the drink that I don't know about. That's
Definitely the energy drink, man. That thing is so good. I every coffee drink that I've had thus far, I haven't found one that I like, but every time I go there, I'm like, I need the energy drink. I don't know what it is. I like Monster and Red Bull and stuff though, so that kind of like kick flavor, I like that. But I was interesting. You mentioned the lines, and so to me, like a big line would probably determine your way. Like I'm not gonna wait in that. But one, it's pretty quick, and actually two, the thought process was in the earnings call. I just listened to it, half an hour before we hopped on here. Christine being the new incoming CEO, was talking specifically like that's part of the allure, right? People are like, you go into Kentucky, which doesn't have Dutch Bros. It's this Western Coast coffee company that's coming into your state, and you see these lines. Like people are sitting there like, what am I missing? Like, what is this thing that is causing so many lines? And so literally I've been to two in Tennessee, I've been to a couple in Texas, and only one of them has not had a line. But the majority of the time they do have a line. And so I'm like sitting there, I'm like, it gives me a question to like understand is like, is the line part of the appeal? And they answered it on the call being like, yeah, we want people to kind of see that there's this brand that people are absolutely falling in love with, and the employees love working there, and we're doing really, really well with it. So we kind of want to balance that speed of getting your delivery and getting your product to you with the hey, like we're here and we're kind of booming onto the scene. So that was kind of interesting to hear from the conference call.
Yeah. Do you think it's working like east of the Rocky Mountains? Because one of the big, I think, concerns or maybe things to watch that we looked at maybe a couple of years ago when it just went public was we didn't know how successful they could be moving east, because a lot of restaurant and drink concepts aren't national. Starbucks doesn't work in New England, Dunkin' Donuts, vice versa. Do you think like or anecdotally were the lines just as strong, stuff like that? Like I wonder if they've said anything on the call about the unit economics of stores in different regions.
The place and the state that they've attacked most recently is Texas. And so everyone keeps asking about Texas. And you also have to think Texas has like 4 major cities. You have Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston. Houston's where I'm located. And so you have these big, metropolitan areas that they're really going after. I would say they've been really strong with their kind of growth out to Texas. And I know there's 2 or 3 stores opening up in Florida. They haven't officially opened yet. There's 1 store or 2 stores in Kentucky, one in Tennessee, or sorry, several in Tennessee. There's probably a handful, if not 2 handfuls in Tennessee, none in Georgia as of yet, because there's one right on the border in Chattanooga, which is almost on your way to you, Chris, and in Georgia. And so I'm anticipating once they fill out in Chattanooga, they'll be on their way to Georgia. But I think what they're really waiting for is all the roasteries, so like all the beans and everything like that currently come from Oregon, and that's where their headquarters is. They're opening, and so I think they're kind of trying to time everything. And I'll get back to your initial question, and this is all speculation, of course, but they're opening up a second roastery in Dallas, And Dallas, I think, will be what helps feed the growth and lowers the competitive, I guess, the cost aspect of it, going from kind of Texas to the East Coast. Because driving all the way from Oregon to Florida, or delivering all the way from Oregon to Florida, that's a pretty long drive. Going from Texas to Florida is a little bit easier. And so I anticipate over time, maybe in 2-3 years, they're going to open up another roastery somewhere that's advantageous on the East Coast as well, if they continue to move that way. So I have a buddy who works in lighting and construction. He sees some of these buildings going up all over. He just told me about another one in San Bernardino, California, opening up. And every time he'll just message, because I got him invested as well. He's a small starter position, and he's like, another one just opened, or is working in Florida, and he's like, another one in Tennessee, another one in Kentucky, and he just sees all these ones kind of start to build. So I think they're pleased with what they've seen. I tried it for the first time in Tennessee. I liked it in Tennessee. I've now been probably a handful of times here in Houston. We went in Vegas, and every single time, like I'm just attracted to their energy drink. In terms of their AUV unit volumes, they're staying pretty consistent, and the same store sales growth has actually continued to go up over 4% year over year, which is pretty impressive. So not only opening more stores, which now they're at 795 stores. They opened up 39 stores in this quarter alone. They've now actually gotten their unit volume still kind of going up and to the right. And so very interesting kind of discussions going on. Their company operated margins going to 31%, like I mentioned earlier. Like they're hitting on so many avenues at the moment. This is 265 in terms of the revenue for the quarter. I was expecting 258. I hit the store number right on the head. I hit 794. In their written paper, they say 795. On the call, they said 795. Here it says 794. It's the same number to me. And they beat on revenue in my expectations. So I was expecting kind of like a 30% year over year growth, and it ended up being 33%. So I think that they're doing really, really well in that respect. Will they continue to do well? I think that that's something that remains. Like you said, I mean, the Northeast is pretty heavy in Dunkin', right? And so I don't know.
Bro, I'm from the Northeast. I hate Dunkin' Donuts.
I'm not a fan of it either, dude.
I feel like Dunkin' Donuts is just burnt coffee that was filtered through a jock strap, dude. I hate Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I know that the people up here love it, like especially in Massachusetts. Like, what's his name? Sean from Invest Live. He absolutely loves Dunkin'. My wife has ruined me forever after I started drinking Starbucks. Now I just drink Starbucks. Yeah.
So
yeah, another thing I saw was that this seems like, I mean, I guess I think I have the numbers here. I was just looking at it while you were talking. At the IPO, they had and this isn't a perfect thing, but people can kind of think about what the margins will be like for a restaurant company. They had a price to sales at like 7.5 right when they IPO'd, which is pretty extreme for a company that sells food. It's not going to have software like margins, and now it's fallen down to 1.7 ish, maybe just say 1.7, which seems like one of those IPO situations where the stock falls just because of the float and the post IPO stuff, and people kind of forget about it because the stock's done so poorly. But the business, at least this quarter, actually has done, like, it's doing much better than things would indicate. It's something, it's a little bit of like a pattern matching thing that I've tried to look for over the last 5 years. I've kind of noticed where the stock will go public. You think it's at an extreme valuation. You think the business is solid. Okay, 3 years from now, it might be down 60-70%, and the business is actually doing just fine. This could be definitely be one of those situations. And I think if they prove that they can go east, then there's a big reinvestment runway ahead of them, because a lot of these regions, I mean, Texas, they could probably fit 150, 200 stores. Florida, same thing almost, or maybe not as much. But
so their goal is 4,000 stores within the next 10 to 15 years or so. So early 2030s, I would anticipate that they're going to be on their way to close to 4,000 stores. They're opening about 150 a year at the moment. That's their goal for this year is 150. The thought process that I kind of have, and just kind of getting to the numbers. So they walked away with like 50 odd million-ish in adjusted EBITDA. So I know that doesn't take into account share-based compensation and stuff of the like. But if you start to look and what does that mean from a price to EBITDA perspective, the company is worth about 4.3 billion or something like that right now. And so if you're talking about the 200, or I think it's like 200 to 220 adjusted EBITDA, if you just take this quarter and roll it out for 4 quarters, because they obviously have new stores and those stores have to kind of come into the band. Let's just say that they stay flat at this 265, which is generally speaking, once they open, they have yet to kind of go down, but let's just be conservative. They generally speaking always are going up and to the right because they're opening more and more stores. But let's just say, for example, it stays at 265, and there's some seasonality and stuff like that. That's, just above $1 billion in terms of revenue coming in. They're going to earn probably 200 to 250 million in adjusted EBITDA. So if you take that, the price to EBITDA is going to be pretty close to 20, which is pretty impressive for a company that's continuing to grow
this morning
at the speed at which they are. And if you look, the price to net earnings is not nearly as good, but it's getting to a place where it was basically break even in terms of GAAP profitability a year ago, and has now grown to a place where it's starting to become more reasonable. A price to earnings of 80, which is currently what it's at, is not great by any means. But I anticipate in a year's time, if it stays at the same price, it'll probably be cut in half, right? The price to earnings will probably be closer to 40 to 50. And so I think that, in that respect, earnings is going to continue to explode. So if you're looking at a fiscal year 25 number, I think that this valuation is very cheap. And I think that with the way that they're going, especially how they've been delivering, is definitely something that if somebody wants to hold this for 10 years, I could easily see this getting to the $10 billion marker, doubling your money very easily, if not tripling or quadrupling it, depending on how well they do over the next 10 years. Chris, sorry to interrupt.
I was going to say there's, just to keep things a little lighthearted, there's actually a really funny set that I saw recently. Let's just watch it together real quick.
What's it called? Dutch Bros? You guys been there, right? Yeah, the High School Musical of coffee. Why the fuck are those nerds so happy, bro? I'm a happy dude. I'm a happy guy. I'm not like, I was just waiting for Zac Efron to cha-cha out there like, do you want a coffee? I'm like, give me my fucking coffee. Something ain't right there. That's some Scientology shit right there. Like, Chick-fil-A used to fuck with me when I go there, but I was like, no, I'm on to you guys now, bro. I'm gonna rearrange Dutch Bros every way I can, make sure it doesn't spell out like Satan's devil juice or some shit. Weirdest fucking place ever. I don't know how that's a... Am I gonna go there tomorrow? Yes, absolutely, bro. I like it because they have a cold brew there. You guys drinking the cold brew coffee? You guys know what this is? Yeah, if you guys don't know what the cold brew coffee is, it's just a type of coffee you drink when you are tired of cocaine. This stuff is goddamn beautiful. How is the FDA not shut this shit down yet? Like, here's how crazy this shit is. It's the only time I've ever had somebody who wasn't a doctor, a drug dealer, or my mom tell me how much of a dosage I should have, right? The guy at Dutch Bros is like, all right, fucking dude. And he grabs a cup. You guys think I'm kidding, bro? Go in there. He's got one piercing right there and a green mohawk. His name was Blake, right? So I swear to God, dude. So he hands me, he goes, dude. Okay, so he goes, I swear to God, this is what he said. He's like, yo, I don't know what you got going on today, but I'd start with the quarter, see how you feel in about 15 minutes. Like, yo, what, is there weed in this thing, Blake? Like, what? Is this Dutch Bros or Dank Bros? What is going on right now? I didn't like the fact that this little kid didn't think I could handle it. I was like, listen here, theater major, okay, bro? I think I can handle your coffee. I got so offended to the point where I actually started listing a resume. Like, you ever do that when somebody presses you of just cool shit that I've done? I was like, listen here, Blake. I don't know if you know this, but last year I went to Coachella and bought cocaine, Molly, and ecstasy off a white dude with dreadlocks and a Miley Cyrus t-shirt, okay? I drank the full thing right in front of him. Later that day, I had so much energy, I robbed my own apartment. You guys ever done that one?
Dude, Trevor Wallace is good. He's pretty funny.
Yeah. But what I wanted to highlight there was just that it's actually becoming somewhat of a cultural phenomenon, especially among like the younger crowd, you know. So especially if you're on the West Coast, you type in Dutch Bros on TikTok or on anything, you'll see like just this outpouring of people like, hey, I got my Dutch Bros fix. And then there's also people like that document their like 50-mile drive journey to go to Dutch Bros. And I'm just like, y'all are crazy for a cup of coffee. But I don't know why it's so popular. But you know, hey, I don't mind milking that popularity to generate some alpha. So
I would say they generally focus a little bit more on non-coffee drinks. So like they do Dutch sodas and stuff, which I have yet to try. I'm beating a dead horse here, but I do the energy drink most of the time. But I'm curious to see. It seems like they do a lot of seasonality drinks as well. So like they just had a holiday version of the energy drink. So I'm curious to see how that comes out. Maybe this weekend when I have an opportunity to run to it. But yeah. Anyway, some thoughts.
Yeah, it seems like young people really like to work there. It's almost like, I don't know, like it's one of those jobs that you want as someone in your either late teens or 20s, and that's just, as the guy was kind of making fun of it, but they have that brand of just being exciting and playing music and stuff like that, and it's kind of works.
It's part of the culture, right? Like they talk huge about people. They like, for example, Brett, and you maybe saw this when you did your analysis 2 years ago. They only want people to open up company stores that have worked at Dutch Bros. So like me, I'm like, oh, like I would love to buy Dutch Bros. Like, let's go franchise one. You can't, right? Like I have to either quit my current job at an oil and gas company and go work there for a couple of years and be like, oh, by the way, I also have, you know, money set aside to open up this company store. Like, let's do it. Or, you know, it's they're big within promoting their own people, promoting their broistas, and that's kind of something that I hope doesn't fizzle out with time, because it builds that sort of culture, and it does seem like everyone's very happy to be there, and just excited to kind of just be there. So anyway, it doesn't seem like people are counting the days or counting the minutes like sometimes when I go to Starbucks. So just food for thought.
Yeah, and it seems like it's not actually competing that much with Starbucks. This Starbucks is more daily habit. This one seems to be maybe some people a daily habit, but less of that, more of a special occasion, stuff like that. And I think, yeah, the brand is very important. I think with restaurant concepts, slower growth is usually better, slower and durable growth. There's been quite a few instances, I think probably the most famous one, Subway, where if you flood the market with too many locations, you think the AUVs are strong, you think everything looks good, but then once you get to this maturity, you realize you've opened too many and the quality's gone down. So I think a solid, you know, I forget what they said, 4,000 stores in 10 to 15 years. I mean, that's probably a good ceiling for them, and maybe opening like 100 a year, 150, 200 a year, maybe as they get bigger. I mean, the formula works. That's how a lot of these restaurant compounders start out. And if you kind of buy at the right price and you're confident that it can go nationwide, and you're confident in the margin, which seems like Dutch Bros has got some of those advantageous margins out there, just because those locations are so small, and as you mentioned, they just cycle those cars in so efficiently, sort of like a Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, I guess my thought process is like they've mentioned it a little bit, where it seems like in there's a duality to it, right? There's the piece of going from the West Coast to the East Coast. It's cheaper in terms of build costs, and also just labor costs. They talked a little bit about how California stores are currently paying about $16 an hour, and that's soon going to have to go to $20 an hour. So there's that piece of how going from West Coast to East Coast is actually showing a positive in terms of the gross margins, gross profit margins coming out. And then also there was the piece about this. They didn't talk about it much this quarter, but last quarter they highlighted very heavily about how infill somewhat eats away at some of your AUV. So like if you have one that's say 5 miles away, and like you said, you're like, hey, it's the weekend, let's go to Dutch Bros. Now you have one that's only 2.5 miles away. You're going to go to the one that's 2.5 miles away, not the one that's 5. And so technically you're eating your own competition at that point. So there's like a piece where it's like, at what point is the saturation too much? And they have a really good pinwheel around Houston, which I think is pretty interesting to see. It's like the routes that everyone from the suburbs of Houston have to go into the center of the city, maybe for like day-to-day work. And it's like, as soon as you get into Houston, it's like, that's where they're at. It sometimes they're in the suburbs themselves, but there's none in like downtown Houston. So it's like, they almost want to make it. So it's like, not while you're at work, but on your way into work sort of feel. It's pretty crazy. Cause like I used to live like in downtown Houston, and I'd have to drive, like Chris said, like 10-15 minutes just to go to the closest one. I'd probably longer, probably 20 to 25 minutes, because they're all on the outskirts of town. So it's interesting. I don't know if that's like a concept where they're like trying to go after the suburbanish market versus say the urban market. Maybe that they thought that the culture fits better with more of these suburban stores rather than the urban stores. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it's also the fact that there's less ability to do drive-throughs in those locations, and it's all mostly drive-through versus like sit down sort of esque restaurants. Anyway, just some food for thought.